Prostitution, a word with a heavy negative connotation that we have all heard beaten to death countlessly over the course of our lifetimes. We continually hear it on the nightly news broadcasts, radio shows, and more. When we first hear the word prostitution, we automatically manifest negative connotations in our minds. We recollect hearing about the prostitute that is addicted to drugs and has made their home the dirty streets. We remember seeing a nightly television show featuring a prostitute that has contracted various different sexually transmitted diseases. We see all of these terrible things, and we reflect on how grateful we are that prostitution is illegal. Still, nevertheless, we never consider the actual benefits there could be in making this forbidden practice legal. I have done extensive research on the current status of prostitution in various research papers and projects over the course of my time as a college student. If the United States were to enforce legal places of prostitution, a safer and a smarter society would emerge. In order to understand the importance of legalizing prostitution in the United States, it is imperative to define terms. The Oxford Dictionary comprehensively defines prostitution as the action of prostituting or condition of being prostituted, the practice or occupation of engaging in sexual activity with someone for payment. Acts of prostitution may be carried out in various locations and areas depending on various countries' laws and standards. For instance, in select countries, there are specific places of legal prostitution. These places are typically known as brothels. Brothels commonly consist of two or more prostitutes working in one building selling sex. Although one may have a preconceived notion that brothels are a filthy place to work, they offer further security for the sex worker. Prostitutes who work in brothels are increasingly more safe than those who work on the streets. Prostitutes who work on the streets are typically under the reign of a pimp. The Oxford Dictionary defines the word in a simplified way: a man who takes the proportion of the earnings of the prostitute, usually in return for arranging clients, providing protection, etc. Now that the terms surrounding prostitution are defined, it is essential to examine the current legal status of prostitution in America. Currently in America, prostitution is only partially legal. This means that prostitution is only legal in permitted areas. According to Romanian Economic and Business Review, at present, the practice of prostitution is not permissively regulated in any of the American states except for the majority of the counties in the state of Nevada. Nevada is the only American state where prostitution is legal and regulated. It can be practiced in brothels based on a license issued by the local administration and after passing compulsory medical tests. This means, under government law, a sex worker would be forced to travel to select counties in Nevada in order to avoid being prosecuted. This, which could be extremely perplexing for citizens to understand. If the sex worker were to cross the border of the given county, they danger becoming arrested. On top of this incredibly puzzling, difficult legal aspects, the punishment of this sex work is incredibly unjust. The punishments regarding prostitution in the United States are cruel and unusual. Juno Mack, a prostitute and sex work activist, claims on average, all parties involved in sex trade are penalized if they're caught. The Romanian Economic and Business Review states that New York City has the most serious penalties surrounding prostitution. Article 230 of the Criminal Law of the State of New York stipulates that a person is guilty of prostitution when she engages, offers her consent, or offers to engage in sexual activity with another person in exchange for a sum of money. The prostitute is punished with imprisonment for periods up to 3 months and or $500 criminal fine. The client risks 1 year of prison while the pimp risks 7 years. Considering most parties involved in sex trade are all consenting to the act that they are participating in, the punishment is incredibly unjust. Criminalization of prostitution increases the transmission of sexually transmitted diseases among prostitutes, their clients, and other third parties involved. According to a sex worker, Juno Mack, if you're selling sex in places like New York, a police officer can arrest you if you're caught carrying condoms, because condoms can legally be used as evidence that you are selling sex. Obviously, this increases HIV risk. This is a detrimental concern for all parties involved in sex exchange. Sexually transmitted diseases will continue to spread rapidly as long as prostitution is legal in America. Once prostitution is legalized in America, sex workers and their clients will be significantly protected against sexually transmitted diseases. According to Romanian Economic and Business Review, in the counties of legal prostitution in Nevada, sex workers are required to take periodical physical examinations and tests, some of them even on a weekly basis, and the weekly basis tests are made for chlamydia, gonorrhea, and there are monthly tests for HIV testing. The male workers also have to undergo urethral examinations. The continuous medical exams of the sex workers is essential to keep the clients that are participating in the sex exchange safe. Arguments against legal prostitution claim that sex work is morally dehumanizing. According to Zachary Streit, prostitution has its share of detractors. Some oppose it on the grounds that it objectifies, exploits, and ultimately dehumanizes women. Others decry it for participating social ills such as the proliferation of communicable diseases, crime, rape, and the trafficking of women. The majority of the arguments surrounding the morality of the sex work are based on the degrading of women. According to an article that compares and contrasts the logistics of legal prostitution, claims that prostitution is morally wrong. The article goes on to explain that this job often amounts to bought rape. Prostitution is by definition degrading to women. It reduces them as merchandise to be bought, sold, and abused. Since the overwhelming majority of prostitutes are women, legalizing it would reinforce their oppression by male-dominated societies and present a clear affront to the concept of gender equality. The attacks on the morality of the sex workers is ultimately faulty and defective. Criminalizing prostitution ultimately forces the morality of the sex workers to be questioned. Juno Mack claims that criminalization is a trap. It is hard to get a conventional job when you have a criminal record. Potential employers won't hire you. Assuming that you still need the money, you'll stay in the more flexible, informal economy. The law forces you to keep selling sex, which is the exact opposite of its intended effect. If you're forced between obeying the law or feeding yourself and your family, you're going to do the work anyway and take the risk. This ultimately means that sex workers are not selling sex based off morals, they are selling sex to survive. In a study of female sex workers in Kerman, Iran, it was found that we learned that the major factors impacting women's initiation into sex circulated around their vulnerability and chronic poverty. Participants continue to sell sex due to their limited opportunities, drug dependence, and financial needs. This reiterates the fact that women are not selling sex on the street for moral reasons, they are doing it to survive. Making prostitution legal ultimately would diminish this risk and allow sex workers to be safe and protected. The sex workers would choose prostitution as their job and not be forced to be a slave to the law as they would under criminalization. Sex workers would ultimately be protected from government arrest and be increasingly safe in a brothel setting. Ultimately, if the United States were to enforce legal places of prostitution, a safer and a smarter society would emerge.